So for this week's Better Beader episode, what I wanted to go over with you were clasps and what type of closures you are going to use for what type of projects. Whether or not you want to make a heavy necklace or a light bracelet, what would be the best suggestion to use and the best product to use to make sure that you are not going to lose your bracelet or your necklace, as well as what's going to enhance the design and add to the overall look of the project. You don't want to get to the end and have your project or your bracelet fall off or the clasp come undone or actually lose your design. That is so sad. The first one that I'm going to go over, and this is actually a question that happened with our Facebook Live episode, was this question, and I wanted to answer it more in depth. So this here is a lobster clasp. Generally speaking, the lobsters are used when you have a heavier product or when you're working with chain. So I have a heavy bracelet here that has a lot of fringe hanging down on it. And the lobster a lot of times also will allow you to wear things at different lengths if you're going into chain or you have an extender chain on the lobster. When I'm working with necklaces, I prefer a nice closure that actually closes rather than a button or something like that. So I love lobster clasps on necklaces. When it comes to bracelets, they can be a little bit difficult and a little bit hard, but on necklaces, I love the look of the lobster clasp. It's also great for children because it's actually a little bit harder to get off and harder to lose because you don't know if they're going to be jumping on a trampoline or if they're going to be standing nicely for wearing some of the different designs. Lobster clasps, again, I prefer them on necklaces to bracelets. If I am using them on bracelets, I tend to go with a larger lobster. It oftentimes can be really hard to get a bracelet on and off with that lobster clasp if you're looking at the design. The lobster clasp also is a nice way to kind of lighten up a heavier project, as well as make sure that that heavier project is not going to fall off your neck. Lobster clasps are very common. And when you use lobster clasps in bead weaving, you do want to generally use a wire guard or a wire protector and some jump rings as well. I do not use lobster clasps that much in bead weaving because if I take the time to do something that's not with a chain, I usually want a fancier clasp. So this necklace here has a clasp guard and clasp, and it is one of the push clasps here. So I have a lot of different push clasps, and you don't want a push clasp that is going to be huge. So I kind of wanted to show a really big push clasp with a necklace that's going to be on the lighter side. If you're doing a huge necklace, that push clasp, which this is a multi-strand one, you may want to make it to the front of your design. Generally speaking, for necklaces in the back of the design, I still want to finish it off nicely, and if I don't want a lobster, I'm going to use a push clasp. It has a nice click closure and it has a nice look to it as well. Also, necklaces, keep in mind that they are going to be at the back of your neck. For this bracelet, say, it's a really intricate and beautiful pearl design, and this clasp guard and clasp I may not want at the back of my necklace unless I'm going to wear it to the front or the side and incorporate it into the design, because it can catch on hair that may be hanging down or little stragglers of sweaters or shirts. So that's why I do like the more rounded clasps when I'm looking at necklace and going for a push clasp style. I like to make the clasp really match what I'm doing and match what I'm making. Generally speaking, I'm not going to use a magnetic clasp like these funky hand ones that are kind of fun. I'm not going to use that on a necklace unless it's a very, very lightweight necklace, because the lobster clasps or the push clasps are going to be much more secure than a magnet because of the length of the project. It usually adds some weight. When I go in then to doing a lot of bead weaving designs, I pick up some other fun clasps and kind of go over that. A lot of times if I'm just making a basic stringing design, I really like the look of adding in a toggle. Toggle bars and toggle loops, you want to make sure that the bar, when you're kind of putting it on the project and put the little loop to the side, that it's not going to slip through the project. There have been some manufacturers that we've gotten toggles and we've taken them off the market and offline, that the bar is not quite big enough. The reason that a lot of people lose toggles or lose bracelets with toggles and they say, oh, they come undone, it's because the bracelet generally is too large. I do not prefer the look of toggles for necklaces, again, because of the bars. Although it's really easy to get on and off, it can catch on hair. You want to keep in mind that there's a huge variety in toggle designs, toggle styles, multi-strand toggles. You don't want the toggle to really overpower the piece unless that's your goal. So look for a piece, if you know you're using 8mm beads, look for something that's say 16mm or below. If you know you're using 4mm beads and going to be like doing a tiny, super easily strung bracelet, you may want to even look for a 6 to 10mm toggle when you're looking at it. You don't want the toggle weight to be more than the bracelet, or what's going to happen is that toggle is always going to sit to the top of the wrist, or it's always going to really kind of hang down at the bottom depending on the way that you wear it. So you have one that's super light, you're always going to see it. One that's super heavy, it's going to dangle down and maybe drive you crazy as you're working, say, at a computer or working on paper or reading or something. Toggles, generally speaking, I stick to using with bracelets rather than necklaces, and you just want to make sure that your toggle is size appropriate for your beads. Also, that your bracelet is not going to be too terribly large, because what can happen if it is large is it kind of plays around on your wrist and it can bend back. Also, you want to make sure that the last couple beads actually can fit through the toggle. If you have the chance to make a bracelet and sometimes you have a large toggle, you want to make sure that you can bend that toggle back, the bar, vertically and go into the loop. If I would have had a huge bead here, say a 12mm bead, and I go to try to bend back that toggle bar, if it hits on that bead, it may not actually be able to close because you can't get the toggle bar vertical enough to go through the loop of the actual toggle. Moving on then from toggles, I'm going to go over we'll go over the magnets actually, since I already brought those in. So these are kind of fun hand magnets, and I have this on a tubular bracelet. With tubular projects, I tend to do things more in the round and not a toggle or not a clasp guard and flat push clasp, because what happens when things are in the round is it's going to rotate on your wrist as you're working with it. You can do a button, that's kind of up to you. You can do a clasp, but it will rotate on your wrist because it rolls a lot as you're working with it. So this is just a tubular herringbone, looking at it, and because of that tubular shape, that's why I put the magnet on it. Magnets, again, I generally will not use when it comes to necklaces because they tend to get a little bit heavier. This one here is definitely the focus of the bracelet, and because it doesn't matter front, bottom, top, side, it's good to work with a tubular item. So if I'm doing a tubular item versus, say, a flat bracelet, that's when I'll look for a more rounded clasp, one that's more compact, rather than going along with an actual bar clasp or a flat push clasp, or even going along with a toggle. Keep in mind, magnets, although they can be very strong, they do weaken sometimes after a while, and you will catch them depending on your bracelet, sometimes attached to things that are magnetic that they'll grab onto that. Next, I wanted to go over buttons. So I use buttons a ton. I love the look of buttons, and these are great because you have people with allergies, you have people that can't wear metals. These are a great alternative, and also they're really easy to get on for bracelets. I'm not crazy over the buttons for necklaces. Generally, again, I'll stick with a more rounded push clasp or an actual lobster clasp. Sometimes I do use the buttons though, depending on the look. The one thing that you want to make sure whenever you're using a button is that the loop that you make, whether or not it's a corded loop or a seed bead loop, is not too large. If you have a loop that is too large, that button can easily kind of pop out of there. Generally speaking, when I'm using buttons, I like to bring the loop that I manufacture or make into a nice kind of pointed end. I don't like to keep it real round. I wouldn't bring it out the side of the beads here. I want to make sure that it has a starting point. That way, when I put the clasp on or I add the button through, it's a nice loop. I also like to decorate them with a peyote stitch when I'm working with and making things for myself. Buttons, again, are a great alternative for bracelets because they don't have that metal to them, so you know that you're not going to have any metal allergy issues. And also they are very easy to get on and off, as opposed to, say, using a lobster clasp for a bracelet. These also, the buttons, sometimes I will use when I make things in the round or tubular. Other than that, if you're doing a looming project, Somebody had asked about a loom. There's multiple ways that you can finish off looming projects. One, you can bring the warp threads back and have them go into a button, kind of grouping it at the end. If you have a loom, say a flat loom piece, this is herringbone, but if this were done on a loom, I would bring out the thread in different places and connect on just like I would a flat piece of herringbone or peyote. You also have the option to have glue-in clasps if you know how wide your loom project is going to be. That I could have come to the end here, flattened this out, and glued the cording into that loom project. This type of clasp, this magnetic flat clasp, will also work really well with leather or some of the cork cording that we have. And you can also use it, like I said, with seed beads. So if I know that I have a nice flat end like that and I get the measurement, I can actually a lot of times glue this in. Most of these flat glue ends will accommodate 11/0 seed beads, which if I start out the end or the beginning of the loom or the flat piece of herringbone or peyote, you just need to know how wide to make it. And if you have 8/0s, you just decrease to 11/0s in order to use these. I would recommend E6000 glue to glue into the cork, the leather, or to add on that clasp. In addition to that, when you're working with looming or a flat piece, there is also the option of using an Elegant Elements clasp, and this is a clasp that you can actually, see that channel there, you can take your last row of beads, slide them into the channel, and then if you see those little kind of like wings sticking up, those you fold down and those are going to hold on right away to your peyote clasp. So this is a bead slide, and you can do this with a looming project, with peyote, with anything that's flat. And again, it comes in different lengths and different measurements. Nice, easy way to end a loom project, either doing that glue in or doing this here. You can also do a fold over leather end or fold over ribbon end. That works as well. 9 times out of 10, when I'm doing a flat design, I like to fancy up and make the clasp part of that design. I'm going to usually use a clasp garden clasp when working with it and pick whether or not I want it to be a multi-strand clasp, depending on how wide the project is, a single clasp, even if the project's a little bit wider, bringing it into one narrow piece and bringing it towards the middle of the project, or going really kind of design wild and making it definitely part of the design. So sometimes, again, I will use these fancy clasp garden clasps on the sides of necklaces because I want to put that investment into something that you see, and I don't want it to interact with the hair at the back of my head. So I use them a lot on the side and kind of make the asymmetrical design with these clasp garden clasps. Generally speaking though, I love them at the top and sitting as a focal piece on the bracelet. Bracelets tend to spin around, and when you're wearing with them, they're not always necessarily going to sit kind of facing up. So again, kind of going in, I like to use those fancier ones for the bracelets since they don't generally have a top or a bottom, and they will rotate around your wrist and around the design as you're working with them. Again, I generally don't do the longer or flatter when I'm doing, and definitely not the multi-strand, when I have something in the round or in a tubular shape. Another option or alternative is sometimes that you need stuff that you just want to make stretchy or expandable. If you're working with cording, you may have a bracelet that you want to have be expandable as you're wearing it and working with slip knots, and then you're not going to actually have a metal or a clasp or a glass piece at all. While there are all of these different options and different things going from kind of something wider even into a hook and eye clasp or a figure S hook, you can even manufacture and make your own if you're doing wire working to go in and kind of make crazy designs and have this be a nice clasp for a bangle. So your clasp options and your design ideas are kind of endless. You also have the option to make things longer or shorter by using something like a pearl clip or an oval clip clasp, where you can actually shorten a piece, putting it into the clip, and make this easier to take on and off, or multi-strand as well. There's some fancier kind of spring clasps also, that if you like that look of that lobster and you want something a little bit more fancy, check into some of the spring clasps. There are so many different options when it comes to clasps and so many different designs. I like to think first as far as what the design is going to be, whether or not it's going to be flat, in the round, a necklace, a bracelet, for myself or for a gift may also determine what I use for the clasp. Usually what I'm going to do is pick out my project first, and then I'm going to go and pick my clasp based on that project and the knowledge I have as far as which clasps work best for which designs. Sometimes though, I will find an amazing clasp that I love the look of, and I know I want to be incorporated into the design, and I want it to be one of the main focal pieces or one of the main elements of the design. In that case, sometimes I'll start with the clasp first and then build on from there. A lot of times you don't want to be dead set on the clasp until you are done or you know for sure what the project is going to be, how wide it is going to be, how heavy it is going to be, and what the clasp style is going to be as well. While hopefully you got some great information in this video, it's not going to be all inclusive because there's always really cool and different clasps that people are coming up with and making and manufacturing, and the really options are really endless when it comes to clasps and clasp designs, and even taking some different components that were not meant to be clasps and using them as clasps as well. Some cool fold over where you can actually take these bar clasps and just sew your peyote strip right over them. You can use any sort of buttons, whether or not it's metal or glass, and play with those and really kind of make the designs and the clasps your own ideas and your own elements, added to a lot of the videos and the things that we make for you. The Better Beader episodes like this are designed to give you the elements to create and become better on your own. Take the design and the tools and the inspiration that we give and see and let your mind and your creativity go wild. If you have any suggestions for clasps or want to list in the comments below your favorite clasps, that helps people that, like you, maybe just learning, maybe starting out, or if you're a seasoned pro, they would love to have the information and your answers as well. While I love to give as much information as I can, I'm not going to know everything, and I'm not going to have everything included endlessly in these videos. So if you comment below, give a little thumbs up if you like these Better Beader videos, comment below what you like to use, any questions you may have with clasp use, and we can get to those as well. As always with this YouTube channel, like these Better Beader episodes, if you press the little subscribe button here at the bottom, you can subscribe to this YouTube channel and get regular notifications when we do all of these different product spotlights and videos, as well as these great Better Beader episodes. So if you want to see more things like this, as well as all of these lovely designs that you see below me, you can subscribe and get regular updates. You can also share your knowledge, get inspiration, and interact with an amazing group of people like you that like to design and manufacture and make jewelry by joining our Facebook group for beading and jewelry making. Check that out and show exactly what you make. Again, it's an awesome, awesome community that we are so happy to have been able to help build. Like always, whenever you're doing anything or whenever you're making anything, make sure that you're having fun. Enjoy the craft that you're doing. And if you need any of these materials, any of these clasps, or anything else, you can check us out at PotomacBeads.com as well as PotomacBeads.eu for those of you that are our EU customers. As always, thank you so much for watching this episode of Better Beader. Hopefully you learned a thing or two about selecting your clasps and closures, and we'll catch you next time with new information designed to make you a better beader.